Welcome to Therapy Inspired podcast. As therapists, we have a unique view of the world. We hold a space for grief and trauma, and yet we also get to witness resilience and healing, all while being human ourselves. We hope to share helpful psychoeducation with our insights from our world as psychotherapists. And now a disclaimer. We'll be talking about things related to therapy. However, listening or engaging with this podcast does not equate to a therapist-client relationship. And while we may discuss insights from working with various clinical issues, we don't reference specific cases. Hi, my name is Darby Crosby, and I'm a registered psychotherapist and a registered marriage and family therapist. I have a virtual clinic in Ontario where I see individuals, couples, and families, and offer supervision to other clinical staff.
And I'm Kameela Osman. I'm a registered social worker and a psychotherapist. I have a practice in Bougainville, and I see clients throughout Ontario virtually as well. Welcome to Therapy Inspired, where today we're going to be exploring a challenging yet liberating human experience, forgiveness. We're going to deep dive into what forgiveness means and why forgiveness is a radical act of self-compassion, as well as how can it transform our lives.
So forgiveness often, when I talk about forgiveness in sessions and stuff, people often think that means I'm going to release somebody who did something wrong and excuse their behavior, but that's not what it is. It's basically I'm letting go of my reaction to that experience. I'm not holding that within myself, right? I'm letting go of that, and I'm not letting the other person off the hook. I'm just letting go of my emotional feelings. So forgiveness is about me saying, I don't need to carry this. I'm okay. I've processed what I'm feeling. I've processed what I've thought. I'm no longer stressing about this. My immune system can start to go back to normal, and I can feel more relaxed and calm and not, so resentful. It's really important that we let that all go. I don't want somebody else's actions to make my life less fun. So I think it's really important to let go of all that stuff and to be able to be peaceful and calm.
I'll note, Darby, as you say that, a therapist isn't going to push you to forgive, but we may process like, what is this costing you? And I think that's what you're referring to there when you
Yes.
say like, let go of that stuff and it's for you. It's not about you need to just be a saint and not to have boundaries or anything like that, but it's recognizing that holding on to that stress, impacts us.
Much more so than we are aware of in lots of times, because we're holding on to the belief that I'm right and you owe me an apology, or that was a terrible thing, a betrayal, instead of just sort of processing our feelings and allowing us to come back to sort of normal and everything. We know that they did that, but they're responsible for that. I don't need to carry it day in and day out.
Yeah. And science backs that up too, the impact, and maybe you can speak to that a bit.
Yeah, I mean, science does, show that, holding on to things increases stress, which releases, hormones and chemicals into our body, which increase our blood pressure, increase our, feeling that we're not well, even, or shortening our lifespans. Like our immune system is very sensitive to stressors. Right? And also, if I'm holding on to something that feels really bad to me, it's going to affect my outlook, right? And possibly even my mental health in the long term. So if I want to have sort of more peace, more calm, more happiness in my life, then I get to do the work that I need to do in order for me to feel that I'm okay in this situation.
Yeah. And I think, I'm sure you've seen this too. There's the cost to the body that you're talking about, but I've also seen, as you talk about the outlook in life, I've seen how that frustration, that resentment that can build up when we're not releasing that tension from our body. It impacts relationships. So relationships that didn't do anything, that haven't been at the crux of the person who or related to the situation where we felt our boundaries boundaries were crossed, those relationships too can suffer from that lack of forgiveness. And so let's dive into then, what forgiveness is, what are some of those myths, what it is, what it isn't. And so, really clearly, like I said, therapists aren't going to push you, like you need to forgive, you have to let go. We're going to talk about, like, let's explore the impact of this on you, be really mindful of what it's costing you. And it's okay if you're not ready yet, but we could do that processing. It's definitely not forgetting what happened. And I'm sorry, I'm struggling with a cold here. It's not forgetting what's happened. It's not justifying that, I'm going to accept this bad behavior or excusing the bad behavior. It's not saying that it's okay that they did that. It's saying, I'm choosing to move on from this. I'm choosing to let go of that energy that's associated with keeping this memory alive and active in my body. And so sometimes we keep it in that short-term memory because our brain, every time we run on that person, our mind runs on that person, our brain might say, like, okay, but remember what they did. And so we're trying to shift that through the idea and the concept of forgiveness. And so forgiveness is not forgetting it or excusing it. It's also not forcing a reconciliation. This is a big one. And again, maybe you've seen this in come up in therapy where people are afraid of exploring forgiveness because they're like, I don't want to be this person's friend again. I don't want to see this person that's caused me this hurt again. Forgiveness doesn't mean you have to reconcile when it's not healthy. Forgiveness sometimes is I forgive and I release this memory. I forgive and I release the right to resentment or how tightly I'm holding on to that anger. But, this is what I'm doing for myself going forward. And so these are the boundaries that I'm holding. And so what forgiveness is choosing that peace over resentment. I'm choosing to, not engage with this person. I'm not upset, but I don't think I'm going to be part of that social circle anymore. I am not upset, but when I do interact with, because sometimes it's not cutting that social circle off or that person off, but it is when I interact with them, I'm really clear on what my boundaries are, and I have less tolerance or give less grace to what, when my boundaries are challenged or when my boundaries are crossed. If you are going to speak to me that way, I'm leaving. If, you disrespect what you said you would honor, I'm going to follow through on whatever's the consequence I've previously communicated. And again, it's releasing that emotional hold that someone has over you. So it's, as long as we used to do in therapy, I don't know if you've ever seen that forgiveness hook, that literal fish hook, where it's like you're on the hook and they're actually in front of you. So until you let them off that hook, until you release that hold, you can't get off the hook. So they actually have that emotional hold on you until you release that energy. And I know I don't mean it in like a metaphysical space, but like that tension in the body. Again, as you think that thought and that memory of what happened, it's going to viscerally bring you back in your body to that time and that pain that you felt in terms of that boundary crossing or whatever it might be, the situation that you're thinking or you're struggling with forgiveness for. So when we work through forgiveness and we unpack that, we're releasing that emotional hold that person has over you, or saying they no longer have power over you in that way. And in that regards, it's a radical act of self-compassion because we deserve freedom from that pain. We deserve to be able to move past those memories that are hurtful and take, empowerment of our life in that way. And so it's kind of like saying, I'm letting go of this weight. I'm choosing to, again, it's not forgetting the situation. It's not opening up to being hurt like that again, but it's saying I'm letting go of the weight, the pain that's associated with this. I'm putting it down now.
Yeah, this is really just about you, not about the other person. It's about allowing us to no longer feel that sadness or that pain. So how can we do that? How can we sort of make this happen? So the first step is to acknowledge, the discomfort, the pain, the hurt, whatever it is. Like, don't suppress those feelings. So for some people, writing about it, journaling about it is really important. For other people, they might just want to, sit in their car where nobody can hear them and talk it through, right? And in terms of getting some of those feelings and that sense of, injustice sort of out, right? Sometimes it's just talking to a friend, right? Sometimes it also means that we have to sort of shift our perspective. Like if all we're doing is focusing on the person's behavior and not necessarily on a reaction to that behavior, then we're not looking at the impact it has on us. We're just looking at them. That's bad, that's terrible, instead of looking at where we come from. And I think it's really important that we are helping ourselves to let go of that. We're not excusing bad behavior. We're not saying, here's your absolution. We're just saying, I'm letting this go. I now know that this is a boundary with this person. And the next time, if there is a next time, I'm going to handle things differently. Right. And boundaries are really important. We have to be able to sort of, change our relationships or the way that we interact with people once we find out that maybe they're a little bit more toxic or whatever. So we have different boundaries that we're going to put in place as a result of that. Maybe we are able to sort of talk to them about things, but we don't have to if that's not possible. It's about really making peace with yourself, right? That's what we really want to do. And, reminding yourself that, forgiving them or letting go of that pain is not about me being weak. It's not about me sort of saying, okay, they're stronger than me. It's about me making an active choice that I choose peace versus pain. I choose calm versus disruption. And letting things go, like bit by bit, is really important. So, so maybe today I don't feel like doing that. So I'm not going to do that. And that's okay. Right. But maybe tomorrow I can let go of a little bit, or I can start talking about some of the ways I feel and that I don't like that feeling. Right. And this is a process. It's not something that's one and done. It's something that we have to work through and feel through. Right. And sometimes it takes a long time and sometimes it's a little bit easier, but it's step by step.
Absolutely, Darby. And as you talk about the bit by bit, I think it comes back to the self-compassion. We can go at our own pace and do it in that stages, as you say. We don't have to rush it and, dishonor the boundary or the hurt that we're feeling. It's okay to take it at that pace and be gentle with ourselves. But when we do release, when we do let go, it also gives us back energy to put towards things that, as I say, like, how it keeps us
Mhm.
look, that freeing, frees up that energy, that mind space that you were using, thinking about the situation, ruminating on it, is now free to focus on things that, actually fill us up, things that align with our values and feel good to us. We might be able to put that energy to achieving things that we want in our life. And so it really does make a difference. And like you said already, it's about us. And so it's bringing it back to that. Um, we thought it would be helpful to touch on a few challenging situations. These are fictional examples, and we're not, labeling any names here, but some of the common themes that can come up around forgiveness. And so, forgiving a parent, whether that's a parent that didn't show up in our lives or a parent who made certain mistakes or things that caused us harm. It may not be a mistake, but something that caused us harm. That can be really difficult because, especially in my lens of perinatal work, I noticed that, becoming a parent makes a lot of people reflect on how they were parented. It just naturally comes to mind. And there can be a lot of hurt that comes forward at that time that people are processing. But as we unpack that, as we, reconcile some of those feelings, and again, it's not as simple as let it go. I know we're using that language here today, but it's a process. That process, as you said, bit by bit, Darby, it's a process of working through it, facing it, and choosing to release where we can. And so as we go through that process, we're really healing and choosing to move forward. And so, especially when it comes to that hurt from a parent, what we can look at is, what do I want to do differently? Or how can I, show up for myself in the way that, it may not be that we're a parent ourselves, but, how we can reparent ourselves. How can I
Mhm.
show up and honor, that need that wasn't met? How can I commit to myself that I'm not going to suppress my emotions? If the example is that I wasn't able to speak about my feelings. And so to kind of connect and process in that way. The other example that comes up a lot is forgiving a friend. And so friendships are complex. And again, as I said, we don't have to cut a friend out, But, in some cases, if that person has repeatedly crossed boundaries, maybe it is distancing. Other times it might be holding firm with that boundary and remembering that forgiveness, again, is for us. And so it's us reclaiming our peace by letting that past be and choosing to decide, what do we want to do with this friendship? Are we moving forward and opening the door to engaging with them again, or are we moving forward and we're spending less time with them? Others may struggle to forgive, but they take that step at a time. And so if we're struggling with, whether it's a friend or a family member or a colleague, it might be, I'm going to just be mindful of how I engage in conversations with this person, or I'm going to be more on guard, but I'm going to try to give them the benefit of the doubt as part of that, not holding on to that charge of that past. And so these stories may be deeply personal. And like we've said, it takes time. There's no right or wrong way. The things that we're saying are suggestions of what can help to work towards that forgiveness. Again, if you're struggling with forgiveness, you can, reach out to a therapist, process with a friend, do journaling. There are different strategies to unpack feelings and needs that may come from that boundary being crossed. But the only, the thing that we want to pay attention to is what feels right for us, and to remember to do it on our own timing. So no one can tell you, like, you have to forgive, because that's forceful and that's not compassionate. That doesn't, when people say that, they're not acknowledging the pain. It's okay to do it with compassion. This did hurt, but I know that I want to, not hold on to this anymore. I know that this caused me pain, but I also know that I am ready to work through what I can to release.
Absolutely. So the challenge for this week, or next couple of weeks, I guess, is, sort of to take one step towards, forgiveness, something past, something that's happening right now. And one thing that I often ask people to do is to write a letter to the person that has disappointed, upset, or hurt them. A letter that you're never going to send to them, like never ever going to send to them, but you can, write about what you want to say that you would never be able to say in person. You can talk about how vulnerable and how hurt you are. This is can be a very emotional sort of process. And then, maybe after you've written this letter, you can say to yourself something like, I release this. This is no longer going to be, baggage that I carry. And, maybe you need to do this like a couple of times, right? Because sometimes we let a certain amount of those emotions go, and then, a little bit later, we come up with some other things, right? So this is a process that's not one and done. And forgiveness, remember, it's about you, not them. We're not excusing them. We're taking care of us. It's a radical act of self-compassion, because everybody deserves peace and calm in their life, and not to carry a ton of pain around. So if today's episode resonated with you, we'd love to hear your thoughts, your stories, or even suggestions for other topics to discuss. So please feel free to email us at darbycamilla@gmail.com. And don't forget to subscribe. And that way you won't miss an episode. So until next time, be kind to yourself, take a deep breath, and remember, forgiveness is all about you and that you deserve it.
Right.
Bye-bye for now.